Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to give my review of the premiere episode of She-Hulk Attorney at Law. The first episode was called A Normal Amount of Rage. As it starts, we come upon Jennifer as she's practicing her closing argument for a case with a couple of her coworkers, one of whom seems to be kind of a jerk, but we only see him for a moment, so we'll have to see if he in fact is a jerk in upcoming episodes. And it happens that the walls in her legal office are Hulk green, which is pretty cool. We soon learn that she's already a Hulk from some of the dialogue. And as soon as we do, she breaks the fourth wall to let us know that she knows that we won't really be able to focus on anything else in the episode until we know how it happened that she became a Hulk. So she begins to tell that story, and we get a flashback to 3 months ago when she was in a car accident after a Sicarian ship almost landed on her car while she was traveling with Bruce, who was in his human form by virtue of a device he created that he wears on his arm and which allows him to stay that way, whilst explaining to him her theory that Steve Rogers was a virgin all his life. And immediately after the accident, she accidentally gets some of Bruce's blood in a cut on her arm from a cut somewhere on his person as she's trying to get him out of the wreck, which immediately hulks her out. She runs through the woods as the She-Hulk, and when she comes to, she wanders into a bar where some other ladies find her cleaning up in the bathroom and let her use a phone, at which point she calls Bruce, who comes to pick her up, but whom doesn't arrive before she again hulks out and almost takes out a bunch of dudes who were harassing her. She next wakes up in Bruce's wilderness cabin before finding him in a lab in the basement where he starts to explain to her what happened. And while she doesn't take it entirely well, she takes it a lot better than one would assume someone would take such news, especially given that at first she thinks he can reverse what happened to her, only to learn that he can't. Bruce starts working with her to help her adjust to her new reality. And when he puts her in a scenario that causes her to transform, he's very surprised to learn that she doesn't have an alter ego when she becomes a Hulk. She just stays Jen. They go through a few exercises, and it turns out that she's figured out how to change back and forth at will, which of course is something that Bruce can't do. When she decides she's had enough training and studying of her situation, she tries to leave the island, which Bruce doesn't want her to do. So they end up physically fighting, and it took a long time for his glasses to get broken, which was funny, but there again, why is he wearing glasses as the Hulk? I don't know. Anyway, they end up smashing through the bar that he had built on this island and then rebuilding it. And during that process, Bruce decides that if she wants to go back to her regular life, instead of giving that up to focus solely on being a Hulk and all that that entails, he's okay with it. As a side note, just before the fight, Bruce tries to hold her in place while she's in a Jeep to keep her from leaving, and he isn't able to do so, which I really didn't believe. There's like no reason he wouldn't have been able to hold back a Jeep, because I'm pretty sure he can hold back tanks. But anyway, we then flash back over to her being about to give her closing argument, just before which she explains that nothing crazy has happened to her in the past 3 months as it concerns her Hulk situation, as well as that other than Bruce, only her one friend knows about her situation. But just before she gets a chance to give her closing, some crazy strong woman person bursts through the wall of the courtroom, and upon her friend's urging, Jen transforms into She-Hulk in front of a courtroom full of people and puts down the crazy woman person before changing back and announcing that she's ready to give her close. That's where the episode ended until a mid-credits scene during which we see that as she was drinking with Bruce before she left his island, she pretended to get drunk and really sad that Steve Rogers had died a virgin, and Bruce discloses that as far as he knows, Steve lost his virginity during a USO tour during World War II, which causes Jen to then reveal that she's not actually drunk and to celebrate the fact that Captain America. So I really liked it, but I wish it were longer than a half hour because they really had to rush through the whole setup aspect of it, showing how it happened and showing, the immediate aftermath where she learns about a situation. And, they were going to have to rush it anyway, because otherwise, half the season would have been taken up by that, which I suppose would have had value, but that's not where they want to go. They want to focus on her living as a She-Hulk person. And I think that's a valid choice. but condensing it down to a half hour is really giving it short shrift narrative wise, more so even than condensing it down to an hour would have. So I think that's unfortunate. I suppose it's possible that there will be further flashbacks to days and events from that 3 month period. So I don't know, maybe they could sort of fix that by doing it piecemeal style rather than linearly. So we'll have to see. Here's hoping that they do. Because, I think we need to see that. And I think it would be cool to not have to labor over that episode after episode, taking up half the season before we see anything else. And, that's been done before in the Arrowverse, for example. They did that with the Arrow character for almost the entire run of the show. They kept cutting back to his time on the island. So you got to learn how that time shaped him as a person and as a hero, but you didn't have to see it in linear fashion where all we got for 3 seasons was him on the island. So yeah, maybe something like that is in the offing. We'll have to see. I like the whole fourth wall breaking thing. I'm a big fan of that in general. So I'm down with that. I'm here for that. When she says in the end that she hasn't had a Hulk incident in 3 months, I have to say I find that hard to believe, because even though she talks about how she's very practiced at controlling her anger in a world that constantly makes her angry because she's a woman and it's male dominated, because despite, being a person who generally controls their emotions, everybody gets pissed off and agitated at some point. And I don't see how she could go any length of time without turning into She-Hulk, because even though she can do it at will, it still gets triggered by certain. But I don't know, I guess Bruce managed to do it for stretches at a time before he became Smart Hulk. So I don't know, maybe it's possible, but 3 months seems like a long time. Something else I had trouble with is I didn't understand some of the stuff surrounding Bruce and the device that he made, which he says allows him to stay Bruce, but then he turned into the Hulk in the aftermath of the accident. So I suppose I can assume that the device must have come off during the accident, but they didn't really show that. So I wasn't clear on that whole thing. We also see during the car trip scene that at some point he broke his arm and was just allowing it to heal normally, rather than allowing himself to turn into the Hulk, which one assumes would heal it immediately, which I thought was just an odd thing to include. Again, maybe this is something that's going to go somewhere later. I don't know. I'm sure after seeing this that the anti woke crowd is going to complain that there was too much stuff in there about how men suck, between things she says about life as a woman in what she clearly views as a man's world, and depictions of men behaving like jerks, especially for a half-hour episode. But, first of all, the world is overly male dominated, and women do have to put up with a lot of crap from men. And there are women in the world who are more concerned with that reality than others who take issue with it. So there's nothing wrong with depicting the fact that that's the way the world is, or that there are some women, and at least one woman in the world, who takes umbrage at that. That's called depicting reality. And no one should have a problem with it. So they can take a long walk off a short pier as far as I'm concerned. Tatiana Maslany, of course, is magnificent, and I'm finding that the CGI works, even though I wasn't sure that it would based on the first trailer, especially, and then even the supposedly fixed trailer. And I say that because she looks pretty realistic as She-Hulk if you take the position that she's supposed to still look somewhat feminine, and that's why her skin is smoother as opposed to more texturized, as in the case of, Banner's Hulk, or, for example, Thanos. So I was glad for that. We didn't see Wong yet, so that's still coming. It'll be cool to see him. He's funny. But yeah, I would give this episode 4.5 out of 5, stars, or Hulks up, or whatever. And I am very much looking forward to episode 2. I will, of course, be back with a review of that episode once it drops. For now, I'm going to get out of here. Until we meet again, I wish you peace and long life.